And I'm going to re-put the attendance link in every time I see the numbers change. So if you come in after and you don't see the attendance link, or if you notice, please feel free to help out, replace that, or to put it in for us. So welcome everyone to the last class in this series. On the short course, I do have the long course, which I will put the resources for you into the chat box so you can find all the other classes that are happening. It's sometimes funny having them interlayered at different times, but I'll pull up this list so you can see what other long, when I say long, full day classes. So where are we? March, the next one is going to be morphology, because we did syllabification orthography. So we're going to get to do a full day on morphology, March 13th. Really looking forward to it. There's so much more we can do on morphology. It's a fun topic. So I'll put that into the chat box for us. Thank you, Lorraine. I always say technology is great until it's not, right? All right, so there's that list for all the other classes if you'd like to join in other times. Let's jump right in. We always do start with a land acknowledgement. I do have a couple of resources that I'll put into the chat box for you. And I invite you to add in your own land acknowledgement as well. I'm going to go through these introductory classes, these slides quickly, because we want to get to the meat of things. We have a lot to do, but I do always invite you to have the resources that you'd like to share. One of them on this one is from the Reading League. And I think that's, oh, this one was the moment of silence once. I'll give that, I'll give a moment for people to contribute, to recognize. I will share though, the Reading League is about some, I'll pull it up for it just to see as we recognize and think about, well, all the things that we need to in our world. This is 5 African-American scholars, practitioners, and advocates. Fantastic people who are making big moves right now. A few more people have come in. I do have some Zoom requests, reminders. It is helpful if you please rename yourself with your district so that we can have some context when you're sharing. I love too that I see a few people, Betsy and Erica, have said what grade level. So it's Teresa, thank you, and Karen. It just gives us some context as to when you're sharing with us. This when we're getting into language reading comprehension, the examples I'm using are really more for upper elementary, middle, high, but that doesn't mean some of our younger learners. What we do is we do some things more orally than we do in writing, especially for those our students who are more impacted in their writing skills. So just a few reminders to change your name on your virtual. You go to the participants list, find your name, and you'll notice next to it there's that more button. There's mute and there's more. Rename is one of the options there. The video on is your choice. It's a preference. I appreciate those of you who do have it on, but I also understand if it's a hardship, if it's an issue, if there are connectivity problems. So that's where you'll find the mute and the video piece there. For raising your hands, that is found, they snuck it under the reactions button, so it's not quite intuitive. So I wanted to draw attention to how to do that. And because if you are not one of the few people with their videos on, and even if you are, I can only see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 at a time. So if you're not Teresa, Erica, Jessica, Karen, Kevin, Nancy, or Betsy, and you do this, I can't see you. So hence the electronic is appreciated. And there will be opportunities to annotate, in which case you go up to the top of the screen where it says you're viewing my screen, where it says view options. One of the options is annotate. And it'll pull up this toolbar, which you can move around. And when you writing with things, this color, this little dot here in the middle will change what color you want to write with. And then there's a stamping option there. Okay, so we're just going to pause for a moment, reflect upon the teaching and learning beliefs. You can add something into the chat box or annotate one that you connect with today. Or one that particularly drives you. It's hard to choose what's one. I think I'm going to hone in on the active engagement and the quality teaching. I'll be all of them. But we see a few coming in.
Samantha's saying building relationships. That's the first step. I'm glad it comes first because really those others build upon them, don't it? And for me, of course, the most important at the bottom there is that all. I'm going to get my own annotations ready. There were 3 little lines on your toolbar that will dock it or undock it, and you can move it out of your way if you want. And if you are sharing in a breakout room, the person who's sharing has the option of having a vanishing pencil. You might all, I don't recall. Thanks, I like how Michelle is talking about this courageous leadership piece. Sometimes we have to make some difficult decisions to move the ship forward. And that requires the relationships, doesn't it? And the active engagement of not only the students, but also all of us involved in making that positive change, doesn't it? All right, thank you all for your engagement. I'm going to clear that off in just a moment. Oh, thank you for whoever reminded me about the transcripts. See all the things we have to remember. I'm going to trying to show the transcripts on my end. Captions, there we go. Show captions. Okay. All right, now I'll clear all that off. Clear all drawings, and we'll move to how we work with each other today. And like always, you can something that you can connect to one of these, or you can draw attention to something that we might have missed. My favorite is the grace, which is really one of my values. Of course, no problem. Please remind me of anytime about attendance link. Gives people a moment to pause and connect as well. There we go. What I've realized, while inclusion and sense of belonging are really important, so for me is empowerment, like empowerment of others. Thank you, Kevin. If you don't speak your truth, we can't learn from you. We can't share what your perspective is and how we can connect through those. I love someone's added that non-judgment zone. We listen with an open heart. Oh, I'd almost wish I could find an icon instead of a light bulb there to have a heart. That engagement, accept and expect non-closure. There is so much. This is just 2 hours about each topic. There's still so much we could do. So I hope that throughout this series, I've been encouraging you and inspiring you to continue to learn more rather than expect everything in 2 hours on each of these topics. Let me go ahead and grab the attendance link for people who come in afterwards, because I notice our numbers much higher. There we go. All right. Thank you for that participation. I'm going to go ahead and clear that off. And remind us that we have guideposts. I have not succeeded in speckling these all through or sprinkling these all through, but the ones that I have, this is your guide for them. So I think that icons are a really useful way for us all to have reminders and to help draw attention to things that may be implicit for us, or that we see, but we may not be, when we think others should be able to see, but sometimes we all have different perspectives. So the practical strategy here is that when you support someone with dyslexia or someone with different learning disabilities in your classroom, these visual cues are a great way to give directions and reminders, particularly without words, but they're also good for us as reminders. Okay, so these were the goals of this session. We will be doing an activity at the end to kind of apply this and see how we've done in understanding explicit literacy instruction, structured literacy, and how it applies to teaching our emergent readers and those who struggle. We've been expanding our knowledge on foundational elements of literacy, including phonology, orthography, etymology, morphology, all those ologies, the studies of. And then the last time we talked about syntax, and today we're focusing on semantics. And all along trying to gain strategies to apply this knowledge to support our students' reading growth. So we've had a couple weeks since our last session. And so I want to just give us a pause to see if there's anybody who would like to verbalize, to internalize, to kind of process orally, to question, to connect something that you've been thinking about that's been circling with you since the last time we met. So I'm going to pause and open the floor. And in the meantime, I'll grab these resources for people to have as well. Let me grab copy link address.
Okay, I'll step.
Thanks, Betsy.
I'm struggling a little bit with how to help my readers who are K-5. They're 2 grades levels below, or 2 levels below, 2 years below grade level, sorry. And a lot of them are doing this, you know, they're doing a lot of reversals, and I feel like I really need some strategies to help with the reversals. And I think I mentioned to you early on that we're using Orton Gillingham as faithfully as we can. So we're not doing a lot of actual reading instruction, mostly the phonetics right now.
So that's one of it's interesting that you say that, not a lot of reading instruction, because I'm Slingerland trained, which is a classroom adaptation of OG, where we do as part of our lesson, its goal is reading actual books and pulling the books off the string. That's where we get the phrases that we talked about last time, and we'll be doing some of that this time. With your K-5, yeah, especially when you're talking about reversals. One, and my question with the OG is, are you using manuscript or hand or cursive?
Manuscript.
So if you can switch them to cursive, the more quickly you can do that, the less of a chance you'll have at reversals.
Okay.
Because in manuscript, all the letters start on the, in cursive, all the letters start on the baseline. You don't have to worry about where to start them. And let me get my tool here. I will say that it's hard for me to write with my mouse, but you'll get the idea. Whoops, that's awfully skinny. Let me try a big, thicker one. With manuscript, you have a ball and a stick and a ball and a stick. Notice though the directionality that I went. That's really, really crucial, is that the B, you bounce the B, always start at the top and bounce the B, and the D starts like a C and goes up and down. Now, your kids may get in the habit of writing this, but I want them to say it at the same time, that B, bulb, and D, duck, or it's probably duck. Anyway, whatever your keyword is to help them with that. And when they do, then I want them to always be conscious of that directionality. I will be honest, I wish my daughter had done more, because then as she came to these letters in text and she would struggle with it, I said, where did it start? Because again, this is teaching reading through writing is helping our kids recognize directionality. That we go from left to right in English, left to right and top to bottom. So where did it start? It started like a C and up and D. And so that's what I wanted her to focus on. And again, going back to the cursive though, is that the B starts like an L and the D starts like an A or a C. So they're made completely differently. It's very difficult, they're impossible to switch those. And they get into that habit of recognizing that different feel, and that will help them with their reading. Now, again, it's where does it made? Did it start over here and bounce the B, or did it start like this? Another strategy that I've read since, and I would love to know if anybody's used it and how it worked, because I haven't had an opportunity to use it, is to think about, again, though, starting with how did it start? Did it have the stick first or the curve first? Is notice when I make the B sound, what's my mouth doing? It's making a line, isn't it? So I'm starting with a line in my mouth, just like I'm starting with a line with the B. And D, my mouth is not making a line, it's open. So some things that you can help correspond to recognize. I've known people who do this, you know, making the bed this way. But for a lot of our kids with directionality, that really doesn't matter. That they're still going to struggle with that. I'm trying to think of there was somebody showing me another strategy recently, but again, this is where we come back to today's topic of teaching reading through writing. there's so much as we solidify that sound symbol correspondence, it's going to work in both their writing and their reading.
Thank you so much.
You're
These great
welcome.
Suggestions.
Good luck. And it takes a lot of practice for some of our kids. It really does. Remember that when we went back to this concept of sound symbol correspondences, that folks, if you know these and you approach a new word, it takes you 1 to 4 exposures to learn that new word. But how many times exposures, and I don't like the word exposures, this was David Kilpatrick's term, experiences. Let's use that one instead. How many experiences does it take to solidify the connection between a sound and a symbol? Anyone remember? Remember I said it was 1 to 4 if you know this to learn a new word. But how many to create this knowledge? It could be dozens, if not hundreds. This is where that work really is important. So Betsy, when you're talking about your K5, they are developing this. They're recognizing that OU represents ow. And this represents I in symbol. My brain thought for a moment that should be a C. No, that's the other symbol. You get too close to it sometimes. But they're looking at the chur here. They're recognizing these sound symbol connections, and that's what takes a lot of time, a lot of repetition, and not just time not we're doing things, but actually doing these I don't like the term exposures, experiences, reading it and writing it. The more and when you're writing it, you're both doing reading and writing at the same time. Whereas if you're just reading, you're just reading. So lots and lots and lots of work with that. Somebody I spoke with recently said, I think I need to get my kids more practice. Yes, you definitely do. That's especially your kids who are struggling are going to need a lot more practice. All right, thank you, Betsy, for jumping in there. I'm going to grab the Jamboard. Oh, I don't have the Jamboard on this slide. I'm going to have to grab that for us while we're sharing an opportunity to say who's here, who's with us. And I'm going to just freeze this for a moment and grab the Jamboard from previous time. Is it down this one? Here we go. So that you can indicate that you're here on the map. Or you could put it into the chat box, just a little bit of self-introductions. I used to do let me share. I used to do an opportunity for people to have like an icebreaker, but there's no time. We took that out. Okay, so this is our series. Looks like some people have been putting their information here. Definitely will grab the attendance link again. There's also a place here on the map where you can say where you're from. And we have some other opportunities for learning that we'll jump into as well. So 3 is a parking lot if you have questions or things you want to bring up. Other than the attendance link, because you need that right away. Okay. So let me put that in for everyone. There we go. Okay, and I'll go back to this. I just been introductions. I don't know, we did have one person who's new today. If that person would kindly put into the chat box if you've ever had any classes with me or not, because if not, I would love to spend a little bit more time. But I'm going to, thank you, Pamela. Well, I look forward to getting to know you more. In the meantime, so I will tell you my background. It was as a, I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher, so I was prepared to do that. Thank you, Jessica. So I initially thought I was going to be a high school English teacher, but then I got prepared to be a TESOL, an English as a second language teacher, because I taught English in Morocco with the Peace Corps. But then I got a job at a school for kids with dyslexia, and that's really what started me off onto where I am today. I taught elementary, then middle, then high, as well as university level, people becoming teachers. And but my kids, one has dyslexia and one has autism. So I've been on both sides of the IEP table, both sides of the 504 table. So I have those different lenses I bring to this work. In the introduction slides, I'd like to share some of the people whom I admire. So that is Marianne Wolf on the left, who wrote the Ran Rats and The Proust and the Squid, both 2 fantastic books. The one in the middle is Janine Herron. I'll have to pull up her book, especially for Betsy. You talked about those littles. I should get Janine Heron's book because I've actually seen more recent call for using what she has in the text. I think it was she to see how the letters are embedded in a picture and to help kids recognize, and starting especially with the littles, to go from a speech to print, a perspective of making words first before writing words. So spelling what they want to say. So this is Janine Heron's book, Making Speech Visible. And then down on the bottom is Nancy Young. And if you're not a member of Read WA, I am going to highly introduce you to, hopefully introduce or encourage you to go to the Read WA site, because Read WA, Nancy Young on Saturday did a recording from her new book, The Ladder of Reading and Writing, and with Jan Hasbrook, and it was very good, and I look forward to getting this new book. So I'll put that into the chat box for you. Those pictures were all from the Reading League 2000, I don't remember. I think it was just before COVID. Anyway, so feel free to add into the Jamboard, into the chat, a little bit of sharing. If too many people on the Jamboard, it does unfortunately jam up. Oh, thank you, Pamela. Unfortunately, you sent that just to me, so I would love it if you would repost that for everyone so we can get to know you a little bit as well. Thank you. Okay, so if you want to put something into the Jamboard for us and you can't because it says it has too many people, just come back in later. All right, jumping into what we're doing today. So we're going to go into text comprehension and written expression. So I did get survey results from many of you. I always love doing this math. We have 55 of the 50 of you. So there are more people who weren't able to be with us today. And you notice we've got quite a range. While we don't have any up in the 10 and only 1 9, we have a lot of people right in the middle. And I will say this is especially one of those areas we could be learning about for the rest of our lives. This is where things get really complex, especially with our older kids. Betsy, with your K5s, luckily their language that they're reading will not be as complex as the older kids. However, it's probably going to be more complex than what they're speaking. So this is definitely the key. So I'm going to give in a resource that I have from Natalie Wexler, who talks has a quote that I have on the next slide. So I'm going to grab that. Whoops. Oh, I hate when I do that. I have to restart everything. I clicked it rather than copying and pasting. So let me grab that for you and make that full back screen. This link from Natalie Wexler. Let me get that. Who wrote the what was her book? Is this the same book? No, this is another one. Totally blanking on which book she wrote. It's about writing. If somebody comes up off the top of their heads and could put it in. The Writing not the Writing Revolution. But her books, her work, she talks about writing, she talks about the importance of background knowledge. Anyway, as I said earlier, teaching reading through writing, look at what she's saying here, is that when students write about what they're learning, it boosts their understanding and retention. I went to a lot of sessions at IDA last fall on the importance of writing, how we can get our kids to write a lot more, even quick strategies for quick writing, the kinds of frames we can do, the importance of if we get our kids writing 3 to 5 minutes a day, at least it is that building the automaticity. It's helping boost their understanding and their retention. There's so much. I'll find later for you and put into the chat box some new resources I found on the importance of writing, on reading comprehension, and on these sound symbol correspondences that we were talking about. So Betsy, yours need it for developing those sound symbol correspondences. Jessica, I'm seeing 6, 7. Yours need it for probably some of those as well, because I see your sped, but also for comprehension and thinking about what we're reading. And writing also helps develop some of the effect. I'm thinking EF, but it's not effective strategies. The executive function that we need for sustained reading. And for reading longer passages, I developed some of that executive functioning and the ability to stick to one task, that focus through my writing work. So this is the why here. A powerful way to get information to stick into long-term memory and ensure you could retrieve it is to recall it and explain it to someone else, putting it into your own words. And this again goes back to, remember I said some of our littles we're going to be doing orally? That oral is so, so, so crucial. Yeah, going back here, remember that Nancy, not Nancy Young, Margie Gillis had oral language at the core. Because if our kids can't verbalize a story, if they can't verbalize a sentence, if they can't verbalize their thoughts, then how are we going to expect them to put them in writing? You've got to be able to verbalize it in order to be able to write it. So as we're thinking, I remember we talked early on, for those of you who were with us at the beginning, that reading comprehension is the outcome of both language comprehension and word reading. And so the word reading skills we've gained a lot of by linking them to the writing. You know, it's funny that WR has always stood for word reading, but now that I've put such an emphasis on writing, I want to say writing and reading, but it's writing to read. Then as we're focusing right now on the text comprehension and letters and written expression, we're focusing on semantics. We're going to bring all these pieces together in a way that helps us make sure that we have all the other pieces to support our reading comprehension. To do that, I have a little warm up for you. May I have a volunteer read this for us? You'll notice there's no punctuation. So you'll need to stop where you think a sentence may stop, pause where you think there ought to be a comma. And so I'll give you a moment to read it to yourself and think, how would you read this? Where would you punctuate it? So I'll give you a moment to read it, and then we will punctuate it, and I'll get a volunteer or two, preferably two, to read it for us. Do I have a volunteer who would read it to us?
I'll read it.
Thank you. Is that Julie?
Yes. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours? Gloria.
Thank you, Julie. Is there anyone who interpreted that differently? No one? How about this? Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. Sorry, who knows what love is? All about you are kind, generous, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? So, when we talk about prosody, the proper expression as we read, notice the importance of punctuation. Did anybody else think about those two different ways? And I do have a link to where I got this. Unfortunately, I lost the original link, so this one is Dear John and Harriet. We may see about making this a little bit bigger for you. Oops. That, and I'll get rid of all those ads. And I'll put that in the chat box for you. Come on, go away. It's not going away. Well, you can still see it better. And you'll notice, will you let me be yours, Harriet? So that punctuation matters. It influences fluency. Go ahead, LaDonna. What are your thoughts?
The way the first girl read it was, to me, like how we read it in today's time, right? And how you read it reminded me of like Old English, and how somebody who is older might read it. Like my old art teacher in high school we still write to each other, and he is very like proper, and I don't know. It just seems like we know how to now extend it out and put our commas a little bit differently to make it not sound so old fashioned.
That's a really interesting point. I haven't heard before. You're right. We do look at there are some constructions like that phrase right there, for other men, I yearn. That's very kind of old fashioned. You're right. I never even thought about that one. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. Versus, you have ruined me for other men is a lot more common. I appreciate that. But again, if we're going to see this in text, we need to help our kids understand how those connections and how those phrases connect, don't we? I appreciate that. Well, thank you for that participation. As we get into, whoops, go back to here. As we get into the skills and knowledge needed, we're going to focus on, and this is a reminder of the reading rope, we're focusing on that language comprehension strand, the upper side of the rope, and thinking about what do we need to do to focus on background knowledge? What do we need to think about when it comes to semantics and syntax, which we talked about a little bit last time, remembering that simple view of reading. So we're going to start, though, by thinking about structured reading comprehension. How do we make sure our kids get what they need? So we're going to think about what can we do before they start engaging with the text? How can we help build their background knowledge? What kind of vocabulary supports can we give them? And that's what we talked about that last time a bit. We'll call that lexical semantics, lexical having to do with the word itself. So word level understanding, semantics having to do with meaning. So word level meaning versus beyond the word level. During the reading, let's make sure that we are, I want to change that word. That wasn't mine. Main idea generation. No, it's main idea identification, because you're not the one doing the writing. It's who the author, what was the main idea that the author put in that? And then what kinds of questions you can write to help connect with the text. And then after we're writing, after our reading text, let's make sure that we can understand the vocabulary and apply it so that we are generalizing beyond this text and summarizing the text to make connections. So I see someone taking notes. If you want to take screenshots too, you're welcome. And if there's anything that you want a screenshot of and you aren't able to screenshot on your own, just let me know, because we have a lot to do. So I'm going to keep going. All right. So starting with the background knowledge. These are some cases that are recommendations from, you'll notice it was Nancy Hennessy's book. If you have the time to and really want to go in depth on reading comprehension, I highly, highly recommend her book. I have it over there. It's called The Reading Comprehension Blueprint. I'll put it in the text for you. And it is very thorough and goes into both words and grammar and all of this. The reading comprehension. Okay, by Nancy Hennessy. So these are what she calls the ABCs of background knowledge. And I'm just going to pause for a moment and let you annotate or put into the chat box. What are things from here that you already do, or what's a good reminder that, oh yeah, that's a great way, or a new way that you might think about background knowledge? Like, how can I help use charts to activate and assess whether or not my students have the background knowledge they need to access this text? How can I use some of these like theme texts or experiences to build their background knowledge so that they can approach those texts? And how can I use webs or charts to connect what they know already to what they're learning? So I'll just pause for a moment and give you an opportunity to annotate or to add into the chat box. Or something that we're missing here. Jessica's added in the charts, webs, maps, visual images, globes, key vocabulary. I love that. Okay, speaking of globes, there, I'm sure everyone knows Wordle, but the question is, have you heard of Worldle? Where you look at, it does one a day, just like Wordle, but it shows the outline of a country. And you have to guess which country it is. And if you're wrong, it'll tell you how far and which direction to go. And if you're right, you choose to determine the neighbors and the languages, and it's really fun. They also do it with states too.
drawing pictures of words. Get them into that right part of the brain. I love it, LaDonna. There's another one called Statel for people, Statel, I think, for US geography. Images and colors, yes. Connections of vocabularies, the more we have webbing and connecting, the stronger, remember, the memory for, the more our students know things in many different ways. Somebody mentioned, I think it was Jessica, charts and maps and webs. And I'm going to guess, have most people heard of a KWL chart? What I know, what I want to know. I'm typing slowly because I spilled tea on my keyboard a bit back. And what I've learned. So my assumption is you probably have heard of many of those. Thanks, Christina. I'm going to share with you a new one that you may not have heard of. And I have a link to some more information about that. I'm going to clear that off. This is called, unfortunately, ARAN from Tony Stead, which stands for Reading and Analyzing Nonfiction. Although I've known people to use it even after the listening or watching something. And notice the difference that instead of putting it on a poster and you're writing it in marker, what I know, this is what I think I know, and you're putting it on a sticky note. And so these terms that you see in gray, the gray boxes, those are the terms maybe for older kids. The example that you see there is a one from a second grade class. And notice that it has what we think we know. And then instead of confirmed, it's yes, like I got it right. I was right on that. And oops, it was a misconception. And then we have the new learning becomes that new information and the wonderings. And what I really like about this is that it helps us kind of move away from grabbing onto our concepts and holding on like it's for dear life. It's helping us recognize that I could be wrong. And I need to dig in and do some research and figure that out. So that's just another chart that you could do to help your kids think about their background knowledge. What do I already know about this topic? Or what I think I know, and maybe I'm right, and maybe I'm wrong about it. Sorry about the elephants coming. Okay, so as we talked about vocabulary though, remember we talked before about how we know words and how we know the words in memory. Remember this, we've connected or bonded the oral sounds, which we already know the meaning in that that oral vocabulary, your green that our kids come with. We've bonded the written form to those and created a memory for words. We're going to focus in on the semantics piece though, and this again comes from Nancy Hennessy, is how do we know words? Look at the very complex ways. We know the different morphemes. Remember a few weeks ago when we talked about morphemes, that ED puts it into the past tense. That ing is something I'm doing right now, that tion means it's a noun, and ment is a noun, like displacement is displace is your action, displacement is the noun form of that. It's something that has happened. The figurative use is something our kids really struggle with, but the connotations, and that would be the feeling of the word, so not just the denotative, what it means, but also the connotation is what it feels like. And syntax was the grammatical form that they were using it for last time. And then the semantic category would be things like, if I were talking about trees, for example, the semantic category of trees, it falls into a larger category of plants, which fall into a larger category of living things. And so you see how we can categorize these. And so we can group things and understand them in groupings. So ways to know words can be very, very complex. And this is where the fun with language comes in and the different depths that we can go into with our kids. So for example, with the word bat, maybe they only know one definition in the beginning, and that's an animal. Or maybe they play baseball, now they know another one. And maybe they've read a book where somebody got bat over the head or bat over the ears. It's not a more common term anymore.
but they can recognize and start stretching and learning more semantic connections with that. Okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about all this soon because I've been going through a lot of kind of definitional pieces, but I have a couple more. This is again from Natalie Wexler. And this is recognizing that difference between written and spoken language. Remember, Betsy, I said that some of your kids are probably not going to have really complex words and constructions like the passive voice. You don't hear that in conversation. But kids are going to be getting exposed to that in their what they read. So notice if kids are going to understand that syntax and that vocabulary in their independent reading, they need to get used to it through listening to text read aloud to them. This is the importance of that oral reading that we do to our kids at every grade level. Even when I taught high school, I read to my kids. I wanted them to read too, but I also read to them because we're going to have a different experience when we do it together. I think I covered everything in here. Okay. One more piece on semantics, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of talking because you need to kind of play and kind of talk this through, verbalize, process. So remember I said that there are two kinds of, we talked about, I kind of mentioned lexical semantics earlier, but here's a definition. We're talking about the meanings of individual words and then their relationships among each other. So why verbal knowledge comprises of networks of associations built up over time. So notice I said, remember bat, and now I knew it as an animal. Then I knew it as something that I do with baseball. And think of all the words with baseball. You might have a lexicon of the words in baseball that I don't have because I don't play baseball. And you might talk, I mean, dugout, I know, but there are a lot of baseball words I don't know. So they're not part of my lexicon. And then of course we know these in relation to each other. When we get to the sentential semantics, now we're talking about beyond the individual words to sentences. And we have a lot of referential devices that are hard. This is really complex. When I talk about, when I substitute words for things, like if I say some are going, some who, some what. But we do that in our speech all the time and we might understand it. But in written texts, it might be a little bit more confusing for our kids. And we might have to help them make these connections between the pronouns and what they're talking about. Phrase connections, we started talking about a little bit last time. We're going to really focus on those today. And then the conjunctions are how our kids understand how things change. Last time we talked about those a little bit when we talked about subjective conjunctions, but it's also, if I think about and has equal rate, but it's going a different direction. If, notice that condition. That, well, if is a preposition, not a conjunction, but it could be if or nor, either or. So you have to think about what role do those plays? How do those change? Those words are hard to define, but it changes the meaning of that sentence. Okay, one more. No, actually two more, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to each other. Okay, so as we think about how to build this, remember I said listening comprehension comes first. Then let's focus on the word level, the sentence level, and those longer texts. Whoops, I thought I did have a book. There we go. A book recommendation for our youngest ones. Betsy, your kindergartners, if we have some kids younger than kindergarten, this book, Phonemic Awareness in Young Children, focuses on oral understanding, listening comprehension, where they'll even start with recognizing the difference between speech and non-speech. And I do have some resources for you here. I'm going to add in a few pieces here. The first one is a video. And then the second is a guide on vocabulary maps. Okay. I just have another way of showing that beyond the word level. So here we're going from the phrase to the clause, the sentence, the text. This is where I'm going to pause, and I'm just going to leave this up while we're in our breakout rooms for you to kind of have some processing of understanding semantics and meaning. What does it mean at these different levels? And we're going to get into how to teach this and how to apply this, but I just want to get some general if that's a good question. Someone's saying that if the microphone isn't working, you can go into your breakout room and just listen and just kind of type in and let them people know that you can't contribute verbally. I'll make the rooms a little bit bigger. But I wanted to leave this prompt up for us to have a conversation. What's something that's familiar here? What's something that's not familiar? And we'll come back to together as a whole group afterwards to kind of process a lot of these definitional things that we wanted to get out of the way first. So I'm going to pause the recording. And let's hear some of the things you talked about. There's a lot here. There's so much here. And this is, again, where our language gets really, really complex. And Haley, I did make a note. My apologies. I will make sure to put the three of you together next time. Although I think you are together, but you're offline together. So who would like to start some of the things your group talked about? I hope you were talkative in your groups.
I can go ahead and start.
Thanks, Jessica.
I think the fear is I hope we were talking about the right stuff. We ran with it, whatever we did. So we broke down each of the sections, made sure that we understand what each of them were. The phrases, the nouns, the verbs, the preposition, the parts of the sentences that included, understanding each of the clauses, the sentences, and so forth. And being able to do that using examples and walking ourselves through what they were in a way that we were explaining it to each other quite easily.
So everyone feels in your group feels comfortable with the terms.
Yes.
Awesome. I hope that is the case for other groups as well. Maybe have some pieces that they want to kind of process orally or think about. This was just trying to get some groundwork and some definitional comfort before we moved on.
So I was just even looking at phrases, the very first one that says noun, verb, preposition. And it's like, well, I know what a prepositional phrase is, but noun phrase and a verb phrase, is that like just a noun phrase like happy horse? I mean, versus just horse being the noun? Does it just have an additional word with it if it's a phrase, or quickly ran being a verb phrase? I don't know.
So if I said, if I say girls sing, that is a noun phrase and a verb phrase. If I say the beautiful little girls, that's an expanded noun phrase. Sing every afternoon under the willow tree. That's that verb phrase. Now, under the willow tree is a prepositional phrase that tells me that's part of the verb phrase. So it is your noun plus everything before it, anything that comes up to that noun. So noun phrase always end in a noun and verb phrase always start with a verb. And so if I say, or unless you say, for example, quickly walked, then you have an adverb before, but it's the verb and whatever is modifying it. So quickly walked, yes, but usually I walked quickly around the house. Around the house is, of course, my prepositional phrase that's telling me where I walked. So walked quickly around the house would be my whole verb phrase. Does that help, Debbie?
Yes, that helps. That is not what I thought. So thank you.
So a phrase is one or more words that are serving in that position. And with prepositions, and this was from last time when we talked about syntax, prepositional phrases could be either adjectival, modifying nouns, or adverbial, modifying verbs or other adjectives. So under the table is adverbial, tells me where. In the same way, or if it was one of the examples we had last time, told how, still adverbial. Trying to think of okay, the book on the table is the one I'm talking about. On the table is telling me about the book. So it would be an adjectival phrase. So it depends on how they're used. And that's one of the mixing things about prepositions are really, really tricky because they only have meaning in use. They're ask a kid how do you define of, it's really hard. So I appreciate, thank you very much for the question, because understanding the difference between the phrase and a clause is something that is crucial to understand if you're going to be able to write complete sentences. Because a phrase by itself is just a phrase. You have to have both a noun and a verb to be a clause. If you have only one of them, you have a phrase, not a clause. And of course, an independent clause we call a sentence. And that's remember that for those of you who in your groups weren't able to get to them, if somebody wants to annotate on here, we could talk about the different kinds of sentences. Remember, a simple is a subject and a verb, or it could be, I could have lots of subjects and lots of verbs, but there's still only one division between subjects and verbs. A deep independent clause is subjects and verb. Whereas compound would be two of those, subject verb, or subject verb, comma, and one of those conjunctions. So that's the compound. Complex, we have a dependent and an independent. And a compound complex would be a dependent, an independent, and another simple. So that's where we can get really complicated in our words with those, or sorry, sentences. Other thoughts? And we can also add, I've known a new genre starting that's kind of a combination of these two. I'm not sure what to think about that one. Something's coming into chat. I love it, Erica. This is where our link between comprehension and writing comes in, because when we start analyzing and generating, we start recognizing and understanding it in the reading. So we're going to start with the reading though, and I'm going to do an activity. So we're going to move into the during reading structuring. And I'm going to, we're going to do a process. I'm going to show a video. I'm going to do it with us first. So some of these phrases, and then we're going to show a video of it in action. Some of these phrases are in this section we talked about last time when we were doing grammar. And so you'll recognize some of these. And so if I were actually teaching this in class, I would have those phrases still on the board. I'll go ahead and underline some of them so you can recognize for those of you who weren't here. This was a noun phrase that we used last time. This was an adjectival phrase we used last time. One of the greatest inventors in the, I don't remember if it was in the, it stopped here or was in the world. There's a noun phrase. So some of these were in what we had last time, and I would keep them on the wall. So to demonstrate though how I'm going to structure the reading for my students, respecting and honoring the phrases, I'm going to ask for volunteers to read for me, and I'm going to structure it. So I'm going to not going to ask you to just read it. I'm going to tell you how much to read and what to read. So I really would prefer if I could have 3 or 4, at minimum 4 volunteers, 3 or 4 volunteers to unmute and be oral readers for us so we can demonstrate a very structured approach to reading.
I'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Karen. And Erica, you can go ahead and unmute too. I need at least one more person, 2 preferably. Thank you, Debbie. Deborah. And let's see. Jessica, can I get to call on you too? Okay. So Erica, I'm going to start with you. Will you please read for us the who phrase?
Thomas A. Edison
What did he do, Karen? One word.
Lived from 1847 to 1931.
Now, that was read perfectly. If you would just use the word lived, then I would ask Deborah, when did he live?
Okay.
So Jessica, I'd like you to reread that sentence, pausing at the phrases, please.
Thomas A. Edison lived from 1847 to 1931.
Excellent. Now, if we needed to, we could talk about when, we could make these connections, but we're going to continue on. Karen, will you please read for me the next 3 words?
He is called.
Deborah, what is he called?
One of the greatest inventors in the world.
And again, if you had stopped at inventors, I would say, which inventors? What are we talking about? But I have options here because that was a short enough phrase that you were able to read that all at once, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Erica, will you please reread that sentence, pausing at the phrases?
at the phrases. Okay. He is called one of the greatest.
Did you hear Karen? I gave her 3 words to start. So my apologies on using the word phrases, pausing like we chunked it, we'll call it that way.
Okay, because it was a
Mhm.
subject and
You're
verb
right,
would
the
be
first one's a
clause and not
clause,
a
not a check.
phrase.
Mhm.
So I guess
Good
okay. So he is called one of the greatest inventors in the world.
Now notice I'm trying to get you to go clause, phrase or clause rather than individual words. Okay, the next two words, Jessica.
His inventions.
That's a noun phrase, isn't it? Deborah, tell me about those inventions.
Have improved the lives. Should
Which
we-
lives is she talking about, Erica?
Of millions of people.
Okay, Karen, can you reread that, pausing as we've chunked it?
His inventions have improved the lives of millions of people.
Exactly. Thank you. Do you see what we're trying to do? So next one, I would say Edison. Who? That's our who. Tell me about him. He was not afraid to try. Now, notice I've got a sentence there that's an interestingly ended, because we try something, don't we? But we don't know in this sentence what that something is. We're going to have to continue reading to answer that question, aren't we? Okay, we have a long clause. Deborah, will you read that next long clause for us that ends at the comma?
Even when he failed with something new,
Finish it up for us, Jessica.
He did not give up.
So Erica, did that answer the question now of what he wasn't afraid to try? It's not really explicit here, but can you take a guess
It
from
was
what we
something
read?
new, but we don't know what that something was.
But it might be just anything new, isn't it? Okay, so you see how we're structuring this. Thank you for our volunteers. I appreciate that. I'm going to show an example of the middle school teacher we saw last time doing this with her students. Now this is a longer video than we're going to watch the whole thing, but I'll put it in the chat box in case you'd like to watch it on your own. And a little trick is that if you type the letter O, it will advance 10 seconds. So I'm going to skip 8 times till we get into the reading of the text. So bear with me. I'm going to pause the recording in what we read. And so whether it's or the, yes, in the long run, I mean, it does have a difference, slight and enough, but again, she's picking her battles. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to each other about this, as well as have some practice taking a look at a passage and trying it. So I'm going to change our breakout rooms a little bit because we had some that were a little bit big and some that were not. So I'm going to do some fixing of those. And I know there was at least one group who wanted to be together. So I'm going to do let me just add in a room here. And I want you all to have enough people to talk to. But at the same time, I want you to be able to practice this. And so your settings are that one person could share screen while everyone else is talking. So I have 2 passages that I'm going to give to you. If you're choosing the first one, it has chunked page in the middle where the phrases and clauses are chunked. I would suggest going past that so you can try it on your own. And also because sometimes we might disagree with those, and we'll talk about it. And then there's another one, I think, where they just start putting lines instead of pulling it apart. So two different ones that we'll talk about when you come back. And I want you to give it a try. So I'm going to give you a moment to get those out of the chat box. And so you can either look at the first passage or that extra passage. And then when we come back, you'll talk about how did that feel? Try at least one sentence or two where you would divide the sentences into phrases or clauses to make it more accessible to your students and support their students in their reading. And I know that there was one room I did not, actually I'm going to add 2 rooms. One group I did not get together last time, so I'm going to fix that this time. I think was it Jill, were you good? I'm going to pause recording now. Recording. And I can pull up I did bring up the passages if we want to have it look at it while we have a conversation. I also pulled up this link with Natalie Wexler's book, that the knowledge gap was the one I was thinking about, where she's really talking about the importance of background knowledge. And then the writing revolution was the other one I was mentioning. And this is Nancy Hennessy's the reading comprehension blueprint, which is very, very, very hefty. I'm tempted to do a book study on this because
it's dense. It's something that you really want to go through with someone because it's got a lot in here, or at least make sure you've got your highlighters and you're taking your time on that. Okay, so this was, I think, the first passage. Is there anybody like to talk about how did that feel? Or the video, any things that you processed, any confirmations or thoughts, or connections? What the process that I did with Jessica and Deborah and whoever our other volunteers were, Karen, or what you saw in the video, or this process of structuring to supportive reading. Thoughts that you had in your breakup. Hi, Andrea.
Hi. So I teach kindergarten, so these are a little bit higher than where my kids are. But we do UFly and they have decodable passages. So Pamela helped me, like we talked about how it's easier to chunk it up and how to help build the kids' fluency. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, our like UFly has decodable passages. So she helped me like kind of figure out ways that I could utilize this strategy on those. And I'm really excited to try that on because it was new for me. I told her, I was like, I'm processing this myself. So she was really helpful and I'm excited to try it on with my kids.
I'm thrilled to hear that, Andrea. And it's funny that you bring that up because for your littles, actually the next couple slides, what I was going to illustrate, actually it's one slide, is the difference between texts that support and texts that don't. So look at this, the one in the back. Notice how we have the breaks don't seem to have anything to do with natural phrases, do they? Notice this one here. Down in the street, outside the prison wall, stood a balloon man. Those are natural phrases. And I have a few here, examples as well, like that one's not as good one, but you can see here, George was more careful to be a good monkey until at last the long trip was over. So this one's not bad, but notice how it's, it's not flush. Whereas if you have this one, take a look. Okay, when he was safely out of the house, he first turned off the tap. So first turn off the tap, that's a good one, but safely out of the house should stick together. So with your younger students, we can be modeling those phrases, but this kind of text doesn't help at all, does it? Notice how we have the word but ending at the end of the line. But what next? Okay, how could he get rid of all the lather before his friend came home? Not good phrases. This one is my favorite example of an excellent example. It's kind of like the one down in the street, but this is the best. With the hook on the string and the string on the stick and the cake in the box and the box in his hand, George went back to the lake. All of those are great phrases. The to the lake says where in the, so you can, there are, with your youngers, you can help them recognize these units of meaning through you reading to them rather than them doing all the reading.
Yeah, I really like that versus using interactive read aloud as well. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Samantha's brought up the stew's ready. Tell us more.
The top one, because I was reading through it, it's hard for us to read because we just want to keep going and going. But for a student that's low level reading, for them just to chunk one Sunday afternoon, okay, they get that concept. And then the next one, Jim's grandma failed. What is, like, we can kind of do the DOLs, like what's a noun, what's a verb, like kind of like go with it. This sentence go with this part and the next part. That's how I think it's very helpful for them.
You hit the nail on the head, though, about why I think that I'm not exactly sure I would go with this same way, because I would chunk it. Jim's grandma did what? Filled a big pot. So because, and this is where we have what's tricky in English is these phrasal verbs that we want to like to put in. So this is a great example of a phrasal verbs. Then that tells us when. What did she do? She put in some water. Now, in some water isn't my prepositional phrase here, is it? I have a phrasal verb to put in. Just like to turn on a light, you're not actually turning on the light. You are turn on is your verb. So here, put in is your verb. And that is a complicated thing because these carrots are being put in the pot in the pot. That's not a good one. That's one. This one, put in some water. Put in what? And we've got a lot of things that are taken for granted and vague here that are this would be very, very hard, especially for a second language learner, to notice. Okay, we've got that Jim's grandma did what? She filled a big pot with meat. That's what she did. Oh, then we have a turning point here in a conjunction. She also did something else. She put it on the stove. So what's that it? It's that pot. There's a lot that we could talk about in this passage, isn't it? Excuse me. Thank you, Samantha. Did someone else talk about this one? Like that one Sunday afternoon, who? Grandma did what? Filled a big pot. So with me to the hard one there, because it is a prepositional phrase, but it's what she filled it with. With lots of potatoes, some onions, and some celery. That's what she put in with that water. Later that day tells me when, what happened. She cut up some carrots. Why? To put in the pot. Which one? Of stew. So again, helping our kids recognize these. And they're not going to do this with every sentence and every paragraph, but it's to help support and help them see these connections. Did anyone have a chance to look at Sam's day? And again, here's what I would do when Sam heard the garage door open. Or when Sam did what? Heard the garage door open. So again, what did he hear? He heard the garage door do what? Open. There was my subject and the verb. Really complex, this one, isn't it? He did what? Sat where? Next to the door. Did anyone have a conversation about this one or the other, or the video that you'd like to share, talk about?
We did this one. We did like the first paragraph, and then we kind of went down to the end of it because the sentences were longer.
Mm-hmm.
And read those and tried to break those up, which was a little difficult. Like the last sentence, it's extremely long. He sat in the sun and decided that staying inside and looking through the window was much nicer and safer than being outside.
Oh, that is awfully long. And decided, what did he decide? That staying inside and looking through the window. That is a very long phrase, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What did he do? He sat and he decided.
Right.
And what did he decide? That staying inside and looking through the window. Wow, that's a very long subject, isn't it?
Yeah.
Much nicer and safer than being outside. That's a very, very complex sentence.
Yeah, we thought so.
Thanks for drawing our attention to that, Nancy. Anything else anyone would like to share before we go on? Okay, you can stop me at any time. Okay, so during reading, here are a couple of strategies, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to look at some other strategies when we have our last sharing together. But it is after 5, so there's always only so much we can do. I try to give a little bit of a chunk, and of course, lots of opportunities to learn more. So getting the gist, getting the information and figuring out what is the main idea is sometimes really, really difficult. So I think I have some resources here on getting the gist in one of these. Here we do. Get the Gist Toolkit, because
this is like, what's this whole thing really about is what we're talking about when we're talking about when we're reading. So notice we've got what's the main who or what, and then what's the most important information about that main who or what. So what's that noun phrase? And then we combine those. So this is one of the most important pieces. Then what do we do then get beyond that to some questions that we can ask? And I'm just going to share these because I love these too. I'm going to put in the chat box and then I'm going to share it because there's just some great questions if we think about writing questions and answering questions. And so you can encourage your kids and our younger ones, I think it was Andrea, you had littles. You can be talking about what kinds, okay, a skinny question, you can also answer in one word or one sentence. Those are who, what, where. And we can encourage our kids, is it a skinny question or is it a fat question? Fat, like it's got a lot to it. So I'm going to share with you that link that I just put in the chat box because it has some great questions that we can start with and give even some picture cues for our kids. And of course, it's going to go slowly. So while that's coming up, I'm going to queue up our next and last activity. So you see our skinny and our cap, our fat questions. But these, if we scroll down here to these blue and the green, the blue are are fiction and the green are nonfiction. So you click these and you can print up these cards. And notice we have our who, did what, where, when, why. And on the back of those, you can have some longer questions that you could ask, but you could just help cue them to ask their own questions with these front cards. And then the nonfiction ones do the same. We've got the who, did what, where, or when, our setting, and then why. So you can see some informational text prompts as well. Okay. Because of time, we're not going to get into all of these, but I'm just going to give you some recommendations from the National Reading Panel. I did take a picture of this and it's in the chat box. Sorry, in the Jamboard for you to kind of talk about some of these, make sure you understand them with your groups when we go into like that last piece. I see if there are any that we haven't really talked about. Understanding story structure, and then summarization is the hardest piece. So I do have one slide about that. This isn't in the chat box, I mean, the Jamboard, but thinking about how do we summarize? We want to get rid of anything that's trivial or redundant. Remember when I was talking about terms, so if I have, for example, the subordinate terms or an exemplars. So if I'm talking about fir and Douglas and or Douglas fir and I don't even remember the different kinds of Christmas trees. I could lump it all into Christmas trees rather than the individual ones that might be listed. And then, of course, we're going to look for that topic sentence, and if it wasn't, then there we can create one. And this is a strategy that was called out by the National Reading Panel. That RAP is read it, ask yourself what are those main ideas, and then put them into your own words. That is very, very challenging for some of our kids. I do have an example that I'll put into the chat box.
Is this truck here?
Hi, Tanika. I'm going to go ahead and mute it. There you go. Okay. So couple other things, and then I want you to go into one last opportunity to talk to each other because we have been going through a lot, is when we bring all these pieces back together, that a couple of reminders I want to talk about, and that is that when it comes to preventing, so for Andrea, you've got the youngers, and I think it was Betsy who was talking about K-5. We want to make sure that our kids have a great foundation in understanding the sounds of our language, how those sounds are represented in print, both through reading and writing, and lots of opportunities to read connected text, and in ways that support their phrases so that they read with prosody. This is one of the pieces that I am stressing so much more lately, that if you think about the elements of fluency, accuracy, getting it right, automaticity, getting it automatic, or rate, they often call it getting it automatic, and then prosody, people just assume, okay, you read the words correctly and then you read it automatically, that prosody automatically happens. It doesn't, folks. That's what we talk about phrases, is to support prosody. Remember that Dear John letter? We read it very differently. Where am I going to pause? How am I going to pause? And that's something we can support our students through helping them with these phrases. And that's, so I would add to David Kilpatrick's recommendations of reading connected text, doing the writing as well, reading and writing. So that's how we prevent. But then, Betsy, you said you were working with kids who were very far below grade level. remediation in our upper tiers 2 and 3 is to make sure that we are eliminating any deficits in phonological awareness, and we're teaching that to the advanced level. In other words, where kids do something with the phonemes. Remember, if they're manipulating them, thinking about taking clash to crash, how it's changing with just one sound. Thanks, Andrea. And then, of course, we make sure that our phonics skills are strong and they're decoding and they're spelling. And again, lots of opportunities for reading and writing that connected text. So, because the key piece to remember is that whether we are preventing or we are intervening, we need to make sure we're paying attention to those sounds, the phonemic awareness, the phonemic decoding, the fluency in text recognition and text processing, the construction of meaning, our vocabulary, spelling, and writing, all of those pieces. We've talked about the reading progression a little bit. What I like to show on this image is notice that language comprehension is going all the time. Notice, I think I stressed that when we first started tonight, this is something I can always be learning more about. Learning more background knowledge, more topic knowledge, gaining and building my reading and comprehension skills, my listening comprehension skills. At some point, I should know enough about my sound symbol correspondences that it really just becomes refining as I go through. But you'll notice it's the same thing with writing as well. T. McDonald, I think you mean the attendance link. Yes, I'll grab that for you. So reading and writing, they're two sides of the same coin. So we just want to make sure that as we are working with our kids, that we're helping them support their grammar through writing, because it helps them understand it when they're reading it. Their spelling through writing helps them make the connections and solidify their sound symbol correspondences for reading. Conventions, did we not notice I have a punctuation that supports our prosody? As well as then we have the translation skills and make sure that we recognize the structure and the process and how we do that writing, the sentence types and expansion, the best thing you could do for kids with their writing skills is combining sentences and expanding them. We did a little bit of that last time when we were talking about grammar and syntax. Okay. Before I put you into your last breakout groups, I just want to share a sample lesson plan. And then I have a link for you can see a video of that. And this is, remember I mentioned that Betsy was talking about her OG. In Slingerland, we will have both the visual cards, so yes, I'll work on Cami, Sindra, and Lucy together. So notice how we do the individual small pieces first. The visual cards would be the individual, I have my cards right here. The individual sound symbol correspondences that we're practicing and working on. And I know that my kids are going to be seeing in their text. So even if it's a vowel consonant E, we decode individual words. We build up to the phrases. That was the preparation for reading individual phrases. And then that reading from a book, the structured reading, which you just saw on the visual side, as well as on the auditory side, which was leading toward writing. Okay, so your task in your group, you have two things that we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to go to our Jamboard, and you'll see that slide 5, I put the National Reading Panel recommendations on comprehension, if you'd like to spend some time here. And I also have some student errors. And I want you to think about and talk about, is it an error in grammar? That's with the syntax. Is it an error in understanding meaning? That's semantics. Discourse is larger units. We haven't touched that one, so it might be a process of elimination. Morphology, we talked about, so morphemes, the meaningful parts of words. Orthography, the spelling, and phonology, the sounds. You can move these around. And if you want your group to have its own, rather than everyone else's, you can go up to these little 3 dots up here and make a copy so that you're only working on your own. And at that point too, we also have a reflection place here where you can add in a reflection or a summary, an elevator speech. And I'll make sure that I give you an opportunity to share takeaways. And we'll have one last group sharing. So this, though, piece is a little bit hard, so I want you to take some time. But we don't have a whole full 10 minutes. I'll give you 7. Hopefully that's enough, but I will stop sharing so that you can share with each other. So multiple participants, I'm going to pause the recording. We have a few minutes left. So I do want to hear if there's anything that people want to talk about. How did that feel? Looks like we have some discussion, some unsure of a few things. So let's talk about which ones and why, and especially where do we feel confused and where do we need some more learning? And a great segue into more learning is I do have the structured literacy overview from the Dyslexia Advisory Guide, or what it's actually not called a Dyslexia Advisory Guide anymore. It's the implementation guide, which I'll put into the chat box for you, is implementing MTSS for literacy. But the version I'm just put in the chat box for you is a Google version because it has some additions. What you see in purple has been added since the version that's in the guide. So the new guide that we hope will come out in another month or two, we'll have this updated version for you. So let's hear from a couple of groups. Last thing, we have a couple more minutes. How did that feel? I've definitely seen the pronunciation, verbs, syntax, orthography. It would be those letter sequences. Remember, we don't use CK at the beginning. Morphology, definitely those meaningful parts. And this last one would be the discourse, your oral, because your vocabulary, semantics. All right, let's hear from a couple of you. How did that feel? Is there something you'd like to share? A reflection? I don't see anything in our parking lot, but I do invite you to have something that you would like to share out as we close out. Our 14 hours together. Round of applause to you all for sticking with us for that long. You guys have been a fantastic group. It's a lot of work, isn't it? Learning to read and write is a lot of work. Deborah, were you reaching for the unmute?
No, I really wasn't, but I'll say something anyways. I thought it was going to be pretty challenging, but with our group, we were able to do it. I looked at all those and I went, oh, I don't know. That's a lot to remember. But really, once we started going through the bullet points and thinking about it, it wasn't quite as challenging as I had anticipated.
Little by little, right? We and
Yeah.
the working together. It's fantastic. Thank you. I do invite one more, although it is 5:30, so I don't want to keep you. I'll put these last resources in. And again, I just appreciate how much you all have done and contributed and engaged with, because really the more we put into something, the more we get out of it. So is there one last thing that someone would like to share out, either about this activity, about the other, or about anything from our 14 hours together?
I just want to thank you, Alicia, for everything you've done and all the information you've given us. Some was a little overwhelming, but it was a good class. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I get the overwhelming. Learning to read and write is a lot of work. That's one of the reasons why I like you to talk to each other and work together. And we'll get there little by little. Okay, so, we need to be patient with ourselves and each other and just continue growing. That's why the reason why I wanted to give you, so as I say, when we know better, we do better, we continue growing. But why I wanted to give you this version, because it has links to continue learning more versus, well, this one does too, but I think that I added in a new, just one new thing, a couple new things here. Oh, these explicit instruction infographics are fantastic. There's always so much more to learn. Thank you, Pamela. As I mentioned, there are more opportunities. If you'd like here under the professional learning, I'll put this into the chat box. Under professional learning, you'll see that there are webinars that we had last year that you can see all videoed and the resources for. These are asynchronous classes. All this is free, and these are all my classes. So I will be doing this again next year. I hope again for free. I usually try and offer this at least twice after school, as well as then the longer classes that are during the full day. So thank you all. Fantastic. I totally appreciate. I hope to give you practical. Thank you, Melissa. And we take a deep breath. And when we know better, we do better, right, Dan?
Yes, I always want to get all the information I learned, I apply to the class. But now I teach a ship challenge, and I always ask the student to, put a hand under the chin and break down the syllable. So I use that almost every day to break out the syllable. So, and I use many more. This will give me more power for my ship challenge. I really like it.
Deborah, I see you taking a picture. I'll grab this. Somebody in the chat box asked about clock hours. I put in the attendance link again. If you have found this and have not registered for it, up here, where is it? This one, January. This is the one we just did. Open link. All you need to do is go in and you do need to put in the attendance each time. If there was a time that you forgot to put in attendance, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here. If you forgot to put in the attendance one of the times, you can just put in parentheses also attended and put the date on